I'm going to talk about a few of the projects that I've been doing, a couple in the U.S. and mostly in India, and then try to go up a level and talk about how one challenges authority. And so I want to start with a project. So I started my current NGO, Public Resource, in 2007. And my goal was to make the law available. I had been putting large government databases online in the United States and then forcing the government to take them over. I did the US Patent Database, I put the Securities and Exchange Commission online, and then donated my computers and my source code to the SEC and got them to run it. They weren't happy at first, but they did it. But the law was something that isn't available in the United States, or was not, and I always thought it was too hard to tackle, and the reason is that there are very large corporations like Westlaw and Lexis that make the law available to the legal profession, and it costs a lot of money to access things like court opinions and dockets and stuff like that. And in many cases, courts or state legislatures make these companies their official reporters. And so for the state of Georgia, for example, if you want to buy the official code of Georgia annotated, LexisNexis has the official monopoly on selling that. And in fact, I learned the hard way that they're very serious about this. I bought the official code of Georgia annotated. It cost $800, 34 volumes. Every act in the Georgia legislature begins with the words, an act to amend the official code of Georgia annotated. And at the beginning of each volume, it says copyright, state of Georgia, all rights reserved. So I bought it, $800, I scanned it, I put it online, got a very nasty letter from the Speaker of the House and another one from the Attorney General, and he said, you're violating our copyright. The law itself is, of course that's available, you can have that, but the official code of Georgia annotated has more than the law. It has annotations. And so I looked at the annotations, and there's like 14 kinds, but there's one kind that the state of Georgia really cares about, and those are summaries of court opinions that have something to do with the law. And so if there's a part of the code about insurance, there'll be a little footnote at the bottom saying there was a court case in which the court decided that insurance really means this, or insurance really means that. But there's other annotations in there. There is Code Commission guidance, for example. So some of the footnotes are the Code Commission wants to let you know that this is important. Or there's Attorney General guidance. Or there's historical revision notes. And I looked at it, and I looked at the marketing literature from Lexis, and it said this is the only official code of the state of Georgia. And in the United States, edicts of government have no copyright. The law is owned by the people. Supreme Court opinions, there's long-standing Supreme Court precedent about that. So I bought it, I posted, we had all these letters back and forth, and then they sued me. And we lost in the district court. We went to the district court and we said, but it's a law. And even if it is copyright, it's fair use, but it's a law. And the district court judge just wouldn't even hear it. It was summary judgment, I never even saw the judge. It was all on paper. We appealed to the United States Court of Appeals, the 11th Circuit, and we had 3 very good judges, and they used to practice Georgia law. And the ACLU came in on my behalf. They actually asked to participate in the oral argument. Normally an outside party can't do that, but the American Civil Liberties Union gets a lot of slack. And so they came in, and they also argued on our behalf, and the judges called the state in, and they were like, well, why don't you just take those annotations out if you don't like them? Right? Why does the official code even have to have the annotations? And they pointed to things. So for example, the Georgia legislature every year takes the official code of Georgia annotated. So what happens is the laws get passed, and a codified law basically takes the law and says Title I is insurance, Title II is education. So they take all the laws that are passed and they put them in the right place, right? They arrange them. And then once a year, the state of Georgia reenacts the official code and makes it the official law of the land. So this was no accident. Now that was, 12 months ago we had an oral argument before the 11th Circuit, and we still haven't heard back from them. So right now I'm under a federal injunction that says if I were to repost the official code of Georgia annotated, I'm in contempt of court, I go to jail. And so we had to remove it from the net, which is nuts. Absolutely nuts. Let me give you one more U.S. example. So our United States district courts sell access. It costs 10 cents a page if you want to read a court opinion or the dockets. And, you know, if you're studying the law, you want the dockets. You want the filings by all the different lawyers and the motions and the orders. 10 cents a page. And so if you're a journalist and you're trying to really, like, research things, you're going to have a tough time because you have to go to your editor and say, I need $400 because I'm on a wild goose chase and I think maybe something's happening. If you want to do big data, if you want to analyze, do courts in black districts do civil rights differently than courts in rich white suburbs? Is family law practiced differently in Texas than it is in Georgia? You can't do that. So I had, in 2007, posted an FAQ on the internet, frequently asked questions about PACER. PACER is the Public Access to Court Electronic Records, and it's ironic that public access to court records is 10 cents a page, but, you know, there you go. And by the way, 10 cents a page doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're doing legal research, we're talking thousands of pages. It gets very expensive. And so I posted an FAQ. And I had all sorts of statistics about PACER and how much it costs and the history of PACER, and that was really the point of the FAQ. But I just threw in for grins PACER recycling, because there's no copyright on federal works in the United States. So once you've bought the document, you can do anything you want. And so I said, okay, everyone, recycle your PACER documents. And it was kind of a stunt. You could upload your documents, and, you know, I got a couple hundred in, but, you know, I didn't think I would solve the problem because there's literally hundreds of millions of documents there. But two young men, one named Aaron Schwartz and one named Stephen Schultz. So Stephen was at Princeton, and Aaron was kind of a wild force of nature. He was at MIT, I think, as a guest. Looked at the FAQ, and they called me up, and they said, well, we'd like to participate. I said, okay. The courts had just started a free public trial in 29 libraries around the country to see if maybe the public might want to know what their courts were doing. And they said they were going to use one of the libraries. I said, okay, well, you know, be careful, guys. Don't, you know, if there's a sign saying don't do it, then don't do it. You know, obey the rules, be careful. And I didn't think twice about it. And then I got email from Aaron Schwartz saying, well, I've got some data. Can I have an account? Now, I normally don't give any accounts on my servers. That's one way we have security, is we have no users, because they're not like writing their password down on a slip and showing it to people. Aaron's a bright boy. I've known him since he was 12. I'd worked with him on numerous things. I said, okay, fine, you can have an account. So he started uploading. Then I got a call from Mike Kyle, who was running my systems at the time, and he goes, you know, Aaron's uploaded 900 gigabytes of data. I was like, that's a lot. We knew he was a bright guy. And he kept uploading, and he kept uploading. And then I got a phone call from Aaron, and Aaron wasn't a guy that used the phone. And for him to be on the phone, he said, there's a problem. The entire public library trial has been canceled. The government printing office has gone and issued a press release saying we've been hacked. We've called the FBI. So I said, okay, Aaron. And we sat down and we talked. I said, look, were there any signs at all that said you can download one document but you can't load a million? Right? Were there any for personal use only? And I talked with him, and he hadn't done anything that was prohibited. And I thought to myself, I had already put the U.S. Court of Appeals online, and I had noticed that there were a lot of Social Security numbers, even at the Court of Appeals level. And I'd written to the clerks and gotten them to redact them, and I knew that the district courts were going to be pretty bad. And so we did two things. I called the EFF, and Aaron got a criminal lawyer, and I got a criminal lawyer just in case. And I started doing an in-depth privacy audit of 20 million pages. And I found thousands and thousands of Social Security numbers, which are like odd-hard numbers. I found the names of confidential informants that were disclosed inadvertently. I found the names. There was one attachment. It was a psychologist that was being sued by a school district, and the psychologist appended a list of the names of 400 children, their age, their home address, their Social Security number, and their psychological problems. And this was disclosed. Anyone could buy it for 10 cents a page. It was shocking, particularly the confidential informants. There's a site in the United States called whosarat.com. And what who'sarat.com does is they go into Pacer and they look for names of confidential informants, and then they call up their buddies in jail and they say, hey, the guy in the next cell was a rat, and the guy goes to the shower and they knife him and they kill him. It's just a really awful, toxic site. And it was feeding off all this privacy information that was inside that database. So I did these comprehensive audits, and with detailed list of all the documents I found. Here's the social security numbers. It's on page 14. Page 15 had this, and I compiled the audit and I sent it to the Judicial Conference of the United States, which was chaired by the Chief Justice, and I sent audits to 32 chief judges to 32 different districts. Didn't hear back from anybody. And I waited a month, and so I sent them again. Same letters by Federal Express, and I tracked them. Everybody got them. Clerks of the court, nothing. And so finally, I was like, okay. And so I got a big red stamp that says third and final notice. And I stamped each of these. Now, when you're sending the chief judge of the district court a letter that says third and final notice, you kind of swallow hard because, these guys got a lot of power. I actually got some letters back. The chief judge of the District of Columbia sent me a letter saying, we thank you for your assistance for the court. The documents have been removed. And I actually went to see him a little later because we were having more issues with the FBI, and a friend of mine introduced me to Chief Judge Lamberth. And it was very funny because I walked in and he was sitting there, and this is the Chief Judge of the District Court of the District of Columbia. His office looks over the Capitol. I mean, it's like right in your face. It's spectacular. And I walk in and he looks at me and he goes, you don't look dangerous. And then he goes, well, how did you find those? I said, well, I searched for 9-digit numbers. It really wasn't that hard to find the socials. So I had some judges start to remove those social security numbers. Some just ignored me. The Judicial Conference actually finally did change their rules. A couple judges started fining, but the administrative office of the courts, they're not very nice people. So the New York Times wrote this whole thing up. At which point, and by then the FBI had already told the courts there was nothing to see, right? They had called the FBI and they did an investigation. The FBI went back to the courts and said, no crimes, nothing went wrong. And so after the New York Times called, they called the FBI again, and they staked out Aaron's house. We know this because he did a Freedom of Information request on his own file. They staked out his house. They tried to get him to come in. They actually called him up and said, well, why don't you come on down, meet us in the coffee shop. You don't need to bring a lawyer. If we were going to arrest you, we would have done that long ago. And so Aaron calls me up and he says, should I go down there without a lawyer? And I'm like, hell no. No, you should not do that. So his lawyer called and declined the interview. But I noticed that the FBI agent was actually based out of D.C. And so I called the New York Times and told them what was going on. I went and briefed the general counsel of the Senate committee who has oversight of the FBI and the courts, and I spent 2 hours with him, and we went over everything. And then I went down and I took the interview with the FBI, and so I sat in an interrogation room with 2 armed agents. I mean, these were cyber guys, so they weren't like dangerous or anything, but it was a real FBI room with cameras and all that stuff, and we sat there and I said, I just briefed the general counsel of your oversight committee, and I happen to have an extra copy of the paperwork. Would you like to see it? And so we sat down and we looked over the reasons why they were hacked. It turns out that they had a cookie. And what happened is when you logged in, your computer got a cookie, and the cookie was good for a week. And so apparently what Aaron had done is he had a buddy go to one of the libraries, grab the cookie, send it to him, and then he sat there wherever he was, and he used the cookie for a week, and he downloaded documents, and then a week later they'd go back in and grab another cookie. And I was like, look, you want better security, limited to an IP address, and there's a lot of things you can do. This is what taught me that the work we were doing was potentially dangerous. Because I've been putting government databases online for a long time, and I thought, come on, it's government data. How can this possibly have repercussions? Later on, Aaron downloaded a whole bunch of JSTOR documents, and he was arrested. He was charged with multiple felonies. They were convinced he was going to throw that data out on the internet, and I think that's wrong, and I think it's wrong for 2 reasons. Aaron didn't put big databases online. He'd give them to me, or when he crawled Google Books, he gave them to Brewster Kahle at the Internet Archive. He didn't post stuff. He took stuff. But the more important thing is he had done some important research with Westlaw. He had downloaded legal journal articles, and he was looking for corruption in climate change research. So he was looking for law professor gets money from Exxon, writes a paper, then becomes an expert witness for Exxon. And he wrote a seminal paper with a colleague about corruption in climate change research. We are convinced that his download from JSTOR was trying to do the same thing. Now, he would have liked for those documents to go public, but I'm pretty convinced, and a friend of mine corroborated that, that that's what he was trying to do. He was trying to do a big data research. And with Pacer, you can't do big data today because 10 cents a page, you just possibly couldn't afford it. After Aaron got arrested and after he killed himself, I did a deep dive into the issue of questioning authority. And it's what brought me to the works of Gandhiji. It's what brought me to the works of Martin Luther King. It what made me look at Nelson Mandela. And so I was doing a deep dive into Indian history. So let me get to India now. So let me start with standards. I have been posting building codes for the United States, which have the force of law. Building codes, electrical codes. So these are technical public safety codes, but they are the law. National Electrical Code is required in all 50 states in the United States, but they're sold for a lot of money. They have a copyright on them. And the fiction is that they're produced by a nonprofit organization and they are incorporated by reference in the law, but the copyright is still held by this private NGO. Now, when I say nonprofit organization, National Fire Protection Association is a nonprofit. They paid their CEO $1.5 million a year, which is pretty good money for a charity. And not only that, when he retired, he got a $4 million payout. Head of the American National Standards Institute puts himself down as $2.2 million a year, and he puts himself down for 35 hours a week. Now, I don't know an NGO executive that works 35 hours a week. I mean, what are you, golfing or business on the side? But, you know, that's not full-time work. And so I had been posting those, and I'm getting sued in the U.S. for doing that, and that's also in front of the U.S. Court of Appeals. It's been a big fight, huge fight. Six SDOs, Standards Development Organizations, are suing us. EFF represents us, and the firm of Fenwick and West. My pro bono legal bill, pro bono means I don't pay for it, my pro bono legal bill in 2015 was $2.8 million. At one point, we had 12 lawyers working on my briefs. Because again, six plaintiffs were suing us. They have 4 law firms. You know, when we went to court, I had 5 lawyers at the table. They had 12 lawyers inside of the bar, actually there to talk to the judge. Absolutely ridiculous. So I was doing standards, and I went to see my friend Anish Chopra, who is Chief Technology Officer of the United States. And I knew him, and I was like, so hey, you know, what's going on, Anish? How you doing? And he said, so what are you doing? I said, well, I'm posting building codes, and we kind of smiled. And I said, you know, I've been doing Europe, and I'm thinking of doing India. He goes, oh, really? Well, you should go see my counterpart, Sam Pitroda. And then he stopped and he paused and he goes, well, I say counterpart, but let me tell you the difference. When Manmohan Singh came to see Barack Obama, big long table, and Manmohan Singh on one end and Barack Obama on the other, and Anish in a chair back against the wall, Sam Pitroda right next to Obama. And you know, I don't know if you know Sam, but he's the guy that put a telephone in every village in India. He was a minister under Rajiv Gandhi. He said he had 11 million union employees reporting to him because he was responsible for health, water, and telecom. He was in Manmohan Singh's cabinet at the time. And so I called him up and said, Pitroda ji, may I come see you? And I brought standards. I brought Indian standards that a person in this room actually went and bought. No, actually it wasn't a person in this room. It was another guy bought them. But I had procured some standards, and I had copied them and put my cover sheets on them, and I showed him. And he had some questions. It's like, well, why are they copyright in India? So in India, it's the Bureau of Indian Standards that produces the Indian standards. So it's not an NGO. It's actually a government organization. It's like, well, why are they copyright? Well, why do they charge money? Why do they charge so much money? Who makes these? And afterwards, you know, he was like, well, you know, these should be available. I said, well, you know, Sam, I was thinking of putting them all online. He goes, well, Go for it. So, well, the Bureau of Indian Standards is going to be a little annoyed. He goes, I don't care. It's like, okay, fine. Cabinet minister says he doesn't care. I guess I'll take the risk. Because I was convinced these are the law. These standards are developed by a committee that has 2 union ministers, 4 state ministers, 2 members of parliament that oversee the process, 650 committees, most of them chaired by government employees, a lot of government money going in. The standards are produced by, those professors and engineers volunteer their time. They're produced. They're issued as drafts for public comment. They are declared to be an Indian standard. They are noticed in the official gazette. Doesn't it sound like a lawmaking process? And then they are used in regulations, both at the union government and at the state level. They are used in legislation. 150 products must conform to 150 standards, or you may not sell them in India. If you sell steel in India or a washing machine, it's got to be certified with a BIS stamp. And so I posted all 19,000 standards. We took 1,000 of them and converted them to HTML. We retyped them. The retyping was actually done here in Hyderabad. We redrew all the diagrams as SVG, right? So you could make them bigger and smaller, and now they were line drawings instead of, like photographs in the drawing. Recoded the math and MathML, made it accessible to the blind, made it work on your cell phone, made it so you can download all of them, made it so it had full text search. Wildly popular with engineers here in India. Many of them used to have to go to the library. There'd be one DVD in the library, and you'd have to line up, and then they had this awful Windows interface, and you couldn't search. You'd pull up your standard. You might be able to print a couple pages. Not very convenient. And you certainly couldn't buy it because the building code of India is 14,000 rupees. That's a lot of money for a book in India. In fact, not only is it a lot of money for an engineer, government employees have to buy these. I was told about an interministerial task force on disaster preparedness. So these are all like the additional secretaries and principal secretaries worried about typhoons and earthquakes and floods. And someone in this big room stood up and said, everyone should have a copy of the building code. And the Bureau stood up and said, well, that'll be 14,000 rupees for each of you, and you need to sign a license agreement. Right? Agreeing that you won't copy it. This is nuts. So after about a year and a half, I got a renewal notice. And it said, would you like to spend another $5,000 to get a continued fee to the standards? And I did what one is supposed to do. If you read the works of Gandhi, for example, you don't hide. Before he marched to Dandi to make salt, he sent a letter to the Viceroy. Dear friend, which was a little cheeky when you're writing to the Viceroy, dear friend, I'm about to make salt, On the other hand, you can simply make the salt available. And the Viceroy didn't answer, and so Gandhi marched to the sea. So, this is totally different than making salt. Standards is a much more trivial issue. But I sent a letter back to the Bureau and said, I would like to renew my subscription here as a purchase order. By the way, here's all your standards. They're on the internet. Isn't this great? And by the way, would you like the HTML? And I got a very nasty letter back from the sales manager. No more standards for you, sir. And so they refused to renew my subscription, threatened lawsuit, copyright violation, how dare you. And so what one does then is one petitions. And so we petitioned the Ministry of Food and Consumer Safety. And we had affidavits from a whole bunch of noted professors of water engineering. Srinivas Kodali had an affidavit. I am a student of transportation engineering. These standards are important to me. Vince Cerf, father of the internet, had one. Sam was no longer in office. He did an affidavit. But we also had a list of all the laws that used Indian standards. We had examples of before and after, like, here's the printed version, here's the HTML, look, isn't this better? Printed it with a nice color cover. Sent it up to the ministry, and we got a very short rejection back saying no. It's like, okay, and so the next step after you've petitioned your rulers is litigation. So we instituted a public interest litigation suit, a PIL. Sushant Sinha from Indian Canoe, Srinivas Kodali from Hyderabad, and myself are the co-petitioners. Our pro bono lawyers are the firms of Nishish Desai, which is a very large, prestigious law firm in Mumbai, and Mr. Salman Khurshid, who used to be the Minister of Law and Justice for India and the Minister of External Affairs. We had our oral argument on October 9th. There's a new Chief Justice. He asked us to amend our brief to directly challenge the constitutionality of the copyright assertions. We have our final oral argument on December 7th. Give you a couple more examples of things in India. So after I started doing the standards, I basically have shifted my focus to India. I spent all of August here. I'm here all of October. I'll be here all of December. Next year, I'll be here more than 6 months. I am continuing to prosecute the issue of edicts of government on a global basis, but my real passion and most of my efforts now is based on India. So we're doing standards, that's technical knowledge. The government of India produces all sorts of amazing books. They assert copyright, but you know, the publications division of the Ministry of Information is the publisher of the collected works of Mahatma Gandhi. They are the publisher of a 60-volume series of the builders of modern India, biographies of famous people. The Archaeological Survey of India has amazing books about temples and archaeological ruins. ICAR, the India Council for Agricultural Relations, has 50 books about the potato, the mango, beekeeping in India, rural tilling, just really good books. I mean, scholarly, really well done. So whenever I come to Delhi, I go to the government bookstores and I buy books. Last week I bought 86 kilos of books from the publications division, and I pack them up and I ship them back to the US, and I put them into the Swaraj collection, which was based on the collected works of Mahatma Gandhi, which I got from Sabarmati Ashram. I got the electronic version. But we also have the complete selected works of Nehru. The government, the Nehru Memorial Trust goes up to like volume 60. There were more books that were done, and so I bought those and I scanned them and I put them online. Complete works of Ambedkar, all the books about the potato and the mango and the onion. The Center for Cultural Resource Training, which has beautiful things, you know, meant for school children about our national flag and our national song and the palaces of Rajasthan. We've got about 1,400 objects in that collection. Now, the government asserts copyright, but my feeling is that these books were meant for public distribution. They were funded with government money. My use is strictly non-commercial, and I feel it's an appropriate thing to do. Now, I totally respect private copyright. If you write a novel and publish it, or a play or a Bollywood film, I really don't care about that. But the stuff in the center, the works of Gandhi, the works of Nehru, the books published by the government, those should be available for people. And so I have been going ahead and buying those and putting them online. Now, that's a carefully curated collection. Really high quality scans. The photographs are all in color, and they're actually very good color photographs. So if you want to take one of the plates for one of these books and make a poster out of it, you can. We run them through OCR, at least the English ones, so that they're searchable. And in fact, I tried something the other day. I was reading a book about Gandhi and the Salt March, and it had no footnotes. It was one of those books that somebody writes. It wasn't really scholarly. And he quoted Gandhi. And I took a phrase out of that quote, and I went to the Internet Archive, and I said, search the Swaraj collection for this phrase. And it came back, and it said, volume 42 of the collected works of Mahatma Gandhi. I was like, wow. And so I clicked on that, and the book reader comes up, and it flips to the page that has that phrase, and there's a bunch of pins on the bottom for other places where that phrase was. And so you can actually take a phrase and throw it in, find out which volumes that occurred in, and then you can see each page and the phrase is highlighted. And so if you're out there on the net and you see this random, you know, Gandhi quotation, you're like, oh, that's very interesting. I wonder what speech that was or what letter. You can now search and pull it right back up. So I really enjoyed that collection. I don't think I'm going to get in trouble with that because, again, these are works of government. But, you know, some of the government organizations are actually pretty picky about copyright. So there's at least a chance that they'll give me a hassle. I think it would be a stupid hassle, a stupid fight to pick because it really is public works. It would be hard to explain. And again, my use is non-commercial. I think it's fair. One more example. So the government had something called the Digital Library of India. So over the course of about 10 years, they scanned about 550,000 books. They didn't do a very good job scanning. They were missing pages. They had the metadata wrong, but it was on a government server. And I was sitting here, I had been here with Sam for a week, and I can't keep up with the guy. He's 20 years older than me, but, you know, it was just like, I was exhausted. I was sick, and, you know, he's on the phone. We're over at a member of Parliament's house that we were staying at. He's on the phone, and bank presidents are coming to see him, and I'm just sick waiting for my flight. And I noticed this Digital Library of India. And so I wrote a little script to see if I could grab a couple of the books. And by the time I got home, some of the books were there. And so I wrote a script that basically started harvesting. And I don't think anybody was actually working on the Digital Library of India. I actually tried sending email and I got no answer. And so I started harvesting books, and they were losing DNS, right? So their domain names were gone. And so I started hard-coding the IP address, and then the server would go down, and so I kept having to restart my scripts. This went on for 6 months. And at the end of 6 months, I had 450,000 books, about 20 terabytes of data. And I uploaded them on the Internet Archive. And the metadata was okay. I mean, we had title, we had date, and I noticed they were pretty sloppy on copyright, and there were duplicates and things, but I went ahead and loaded it up. Now here's what happened. Their server was really bad, and so Google just wasn't indexing. I don't think it could index it, frankly. Internet Archive is SEO optimized, so you put something there and boom, it shows up. So I put it online, immediately got a few takedown notices. University of North Carolina wrote a very nice note. They're saying, well, you know, you've got 5 of our books online, and, you know, normally we wouldn't care, but we're monetizing our back file. Would you mind? And so we did a search, and we noticed we actually had 20 of their books. So I sent them a note back and said, well, we've darkened the 5, and we found 20 more, and we removed those as well. And instantly responded to, you know, any takedowns. There weren't that many. And then something happened. There was a crazy Russian whose father had written a book in 1950 or something, but it was still in copyright. And the son knew the people that had done the original Digital Library of India and sent them these incredible flames. And the poor older professor who was in charge of the program, who hadn't been monitoring it, you know, thought these guys were going to ruin his reputation. They were going to take his house. They were like, oh my God. So he took the entire server down. And I got a note saying, you must delete all the books on the Internet Archive. I said, no, we're not going to do that. But I kept getting notes saying, you must delete. So what I did, because I knew they had a copyright issue, I pulled all the metadata for 450,000 books up into spreadsheets. And I started sorting. So I sorted by author. And if author was Government of India, fine. If publisher was Oxford Press, probably in copyright. I sorted by date. I sorted by creator. So, you know, if it was Mohandas K. Gandhi, fine, right? If it was Nehru, fine. And I was able to eliminate 50,000 books that were probably clearly in copyright. I've got some books up there, you know, from the 30s and 40s that might be in copyright. I don't know. But, you know, I've had no takedowns in the last 6 months. We've had over 30 million views on this little collection. It is books in 50 languages. We have 20,000 books in Telugu. We have 30,000 books in Sanskrit. We have books in Bangla. We have books in Malayalam, in Kannada. We've got volunteers that have been going through all the Telugu books. And the problem is the government, when they put in title and creator, they did the Roman version of the Telugu titles, and they did it wrong. There's actually a standard for how you go from Telugu script to Roman. They just made it up. And so if you were searching for the Telugu books, you weren't going to find them. I've had a volunteer down in Bangalore that's gone through about 15,000 of the books and retyped the title and the creator in Telugu script. We have people doing the same thing in Canada. I have been going through DSpace. It is a pretty bad archiving system that for some reason a lot of places use. I found 21,000 books from the West Bengal Public Library. It took me 9 months to get those books down. I've got 15,000 of them up now. And so I've been adding to the collection. And I get love letters from Sanskrit scholars because they were depending on this archive, and then the government site went down. And it's still up, and it's ironic that I've got the only copy of the Digital Library of India. Now, look, the scans aren't very good, and the metadata is bad. We need to do this again. There needs to be in fact, I now call it the Public Library of India, because I don't want to be confused with the government effort, because they were worried that it would look like I was working with them. So, okay, fine, I'll call it the Public Library of India. We need a real Public Library of India. We need to do high-resolution scans of millions of books. You would need 10 to 20 million books scanned to really do the Indian languages properly. And if we don't do it in India, it's not going to be done. Right? It isn't like the U.S. libraries have these or the British Library has them. If you want to do that, you need to go to Gujarat Vidyapith and do the Gujarati books. You need to go to the West Bengal Library and do the Bangla books. And it's got to be done properly, and it's going to cost some real money. And my hope is that eventually we can convince the government that a true Public Library of India is something that should be done, and it should be done properly, and it should be done at scale. Even if the books are in copyright, they can be made available for educational purposes. Because the Copyright Act of India says if a teacher assigns something to a student, there's no copyright. If you are blind, the Marrakesh Treaty says all books are available to you. And eventually the books will go out of copyright. And so we should start now before they deteriorate. So, okay, we are done. Thank you so much.